people are doing what? They're looking for criminal activity. They're looking for people who are behaving suspiciously, which is a kind of profiling in itself if you think about it. But at least it is in some instances, based on personal experience of the officer. Okay, if somebody sees my car and they suddenly start whistling and put their hands in their pockets and walk down the street looking very casual, that must mean something. That's indicative of a guilty conscience, or they're trying to pretend that they're just relaxed and doing nothing when in fact maybe they were doing something. There are things that I think probably to an experienced police officer would look like, telltale signs of criminal behavior or something strange. You see, it's nighttime and you see some person dressed all in dark colors, skulking down the street from shadow to shadow. You can go, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. Why is this person, walking from shadow to shadow? Perhaps I should stop and ask what's going on. There are justifiable forms of profiling, I think, that police probably can and do. I was going to say, but that sounds funny. But, as we've seen time and time again, that leads to racial profiling all over the place, where they stop, 70% black motorists for traffic stops. Is anyone really trying to pretend that many black people are driving badly or doing suspicious kinds of driving, like speeding or running through stoplights or whatever, compared to other ethnic drivers? I don't think so. So we've seen just from that this kind of giving police the power to stop people based around their suspicions, and using profiling of any sort is a slippery slope, which far too many of them go sliding down. So if you're going to add immigration control or immigration enforcement to their mandate, obviously you're going to end up with racial profiling all over the place, because they're going to go, hey, that person looks like an immigrant. How do you look like an immigrant? It's generally an ethnic thing. It's not like a way that you walk or a certain kind of clothing that looks like, immigrants all wear this, or you're carrying your steamer trunk out of Ellis Island. Yeah, you probably look like an immigrant, but otherwise there's very few ways that people look like immigrants. And so I think this program all but expects officers to do racial profiling. I mean, I don't say it all but expects. I think it actually expects it. They just don't write it into their official paperwork because they know they're not supposed to. But I mean, surely they know they're going to do that, and they don't care. They're fine with that. I'm sure Trump is fine with that. He seems to be. He has argued on behalf of profiling on the campaign trail. I've heard him talk about that on several occasions. So I'm sure he's perfectly happy for police officers to drive around and go, hey, that person looks foreign, i.e. not white. Let's stop them and harass them, and either they're criminals or they're an immigrant or something. We'll make sure that they know they're not welcome in this city. That's, kind of part of the racist agenda. And this is a good opportunity for me to remind you that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers, I'm pointing at myself, and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or UPTV. So I am expressing my own opinions when I call the current administration racist. That's an opinion. My opinion. Anyway, so that's all I'm going to say about that. I think it's a very bad idea. but I have very little control over that sort of thing. So, continuing on, there are some, semi-brightish or faintly luminescent spots. Here's a letter I think it's a letter to the editor of the Mercury News, entitled, "Graham's Support for DACA Merits Support." So if we can get down to where we begin. So it reads as follows. Senator Lindsey Graham's support for the DREAM Act, come on, should be applauded. DACA is a sensible policy for 800,000 young people who were brought to this country as children. After 5 years, it has proven successful, empowering dreamers to get jobs or go to college and demonstrating real economic benefits. If we let DACA disappear, then we're going back on our promise to 800,000 youth and their families. Creating not only a moral failure for our country, but a guaranteed harm to our economy. Losing DACA would cost employers billions in employee turnover, slash the purchasing power of immigrant households, and cut contributions to Medicare and Social Security by billions. Senator Graham is right to say we need a permanent solution for the dreamers within our borders, enshrining a promise like DACA with congressional approval. Doing so will bring clarity to the 800,000 dreamers and their families. That's by the Vice Chair of Public Policy from the Silicon Valley Organization and the CEO of Silicon Valley Association of Realtors, Paul Cardis. His letter to the Mercury News. And it's not just Senator Graham, by the way. He's just happens to be a Republican, which makes it kind of odd for for him to come out in support of dreamers. But the letter, I fully agree. And it is a good sign that in the midst of all this anti-immigrant activity from the current administration, that at least one Republican is sort of standing up and joining with Democratic counterparts. I think it's Senator, I can't think of his name for some reason. I keep wanting to say Bennett. Bennett is from Champaign here, and I know he supports that, but no, it's our state senator. It'll come to me. Anyway, they co-sponsored this legislation, and I hope others will jump on board and they'll get that going because, we need the DREAM Act, desperately need to put that thing through. It's just beyond absurd that has not made it into, and become enshrined in law, and that Obama had to do all the crazy contortions to get the DACA program going. The DREAM Act should have just sailed through years ago, and all these people should have been enjoying the benefits that they're only kind of getting little bits and pieces of with DACA right now. It makes no sense. But, as we know, there are attorneys general from several states who are fighting to get DACA removed. So there's an antagonistic contingent out there who doesn't care what your story is, doesn't care about what's right. They just want you gone. Apparently, that's all I can think of. So as a companion piece here to that, this is from KTSA. I don't know what that is. It says, study, dreamers at higher risk for mental distress. You think? Let's approach this story. Children of illegal immigrants are stressing out about the possibility of being deported, not having a job, and the lack of help with either of those issues. Rice University conducted a study into how stressful it can be to live in this country without proper documentation. Luz Garcini says the age group at the highest risk are the so-called dreamers, immigrant children between the ages of 18 and 25. Garcini says dreamers are often discriminated against, and because of that, they may be isolated from larger educational and work communities. She says that's what's putting them at a greater risk for mental health distress. There's not much help available for them. She says there's a serious lack of access to health care for immigrants, but many faith-based organizations are stepping up and starting assistance programs. And that might be something that we at the Immigration Forum might take a look at trying to do. I know we've talked on several occasions about the lack of mental health services. There are a lot of regular health services that are available, and more are coming along as time goes by. Opportunities to get health care on various fronts, dental care, that sort of thing. But mental health is a tricky one, not only because it's just harder to get help with that, but to get help that is in your language or is understanding of your culture or all that sort of thing. I mean, that right there makes it a more difficult problem, because you're not just dealing with a one-size-fits-all health issue like, oh, do you have this virus? Then you take this pill. If you're a human being, that's how you counteract this problem, or, you brush your teeth or whatever that thing is. This is it. Mental health care has to be more tailored to the individual and cognizant of their kind of worldview and belief system and just how they think and how they express themselves and all that sort of thing. And it's just a much more difficult type of help to find or to make available. And that's what we have run into when we've discussed the issue in the past, or even just language. You can find someone who would be very understanding and helpful, but if they don't speak the language and you're just sitting there, kind of halfway communicating, you're not going to get very far. So it's a big problem, I will say, and it's something that we've been working on, and it's something I hope more people are going to be thinking about as time goes by, certainly with the current administration and the sort of fear-mongering and pathologizing of immigrants that they seem to enjoy doing, and are constantly putting out there, that they're trying to criminalize immigrants basically across the board and make it seem like every crime you can think of is caused by immigrants somehow, and that getting rid of them is some sort of step towards cleaning the streets of crime or something like that. And amazingly, a lot of people believe that sort of thing. And sadly, that's an ongoing process that they're pushing. Thankfully, their general and overall dysfunction is making that effort fairly marginal, but it's still out there and it is still affecting people. And naturally, a lot of people are under an enormous amount of stress right now. Not only the DACA recipients, who are wondering, what's going to happen next week, next month, next year, but their families and their parents and their friends and everybody who is, at least the DACA folks have a document in their hand that they can say, look, the government gave this to me and it owes something to me. It said it was going to give me something. Here's my documentary proof of that. But their parents, not so much. Siblings, not so much. People who couldn't, for whatever reason, get into the program, they don't have that. And all they have is the surety that right now the people in power really, really want them to go away and or to at least suffer to some degree. And that's got to be really hard. That's very hard. On a day-to-day basis, just knowing your government is out to get you. That's not a good thing. So, I'll finish up my point by saying that, yes, more mental health services would be really great, and we are going to continue talking about that and hopefully make some progress in that area in the coming weeks and months. So, moving on. Let's see, where can this? I don't know. I highlighted this article. I don't even really know if I wanted to read it. This is another one of those, immigrants are good for the economy things. But I guess it never hurts to get that point out there, even though that's not the only reason you should be welcoming to immigrants. It is a reason, and it's a reason that is at least sort of easily translatable across ideological boundaries. If someone is sitting there ranting about, oh, immigrants are, taking our jobs, if you can say immigrants are good for the economy, it kind of balances out that argument a little bit. So maybe it's helpful. I'll go ahead and read it. This is from CBS News, entitled Made in America, How the U.S. Auto Industry Was Built with Immigrant Labor. And it goes as follows. When Gerald Granier walked into his first job as a safety manager for Eisenman Corporation, a subcontractor building the paint shop at the Mercedes plant in Vance, Alabama back in 2013, he was surprised to see Eastern Europeans pouring concrete, erecting steel, and fitting pipe at the company's expansion project. There were Polish and Slovenian and Croatian people there. It was hard for me to believe because I just didn't understand why they would be there, Granier told CBSN on assignment correspondent Vladimir Dutiers during an interview at a neighborhood park near Granier's home in San Jose, California. The cars will be built by American workers. It's just the building of these plants that is being done by foreigners, he said. Exactly. They come in at a groundbreaking, Granier said of the Europeans who work on the construction of the auto plants. They're done at the start of production. Did you think to yourself that the jobs these guys were doing could be done by Americans? Dutier asked. Absolutely, yes, Granier said. Granier said that he quickly realized that the European workers were making far less than Americans for the same work, about $10 an hour. How much would an American make doing the same job, he was asked. Probably $45, $50 an hour, he replied. Granier said he saw the same thing at BMW in South Carolina, Tesla in California, and Volkswagen in Tennessee. Temporary European workers rotated into the country for several months at a time. A CBS News investigation has found the practice continues. We spent 4 months tracking more than 200 Eastern Europeans building U.S. auto factories. CBS News collected hundreds of videos and photos they posted on social media, proudly showing off their American jobs, their work IDs, the money they were making, and the B1/B2 visas that got many of them into the United States. The visa costs less than $200 and allows foreigners to come and go for 10 years. Visa holders are not allowed to work construction unless they are supervising a project, which is not what appeared to be happening. Their investigation led us to this apartment complex in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where it appears workers from Slovenia and Croatia were being housed by their employer near BMW's largest manufacturing plant in the world, built with the help of more than $250 million in tax incentives and subsidies afforded to BMW since 1992. Anyway, this goes on and on to talk about this, but the point of this article, I think, is that even when you think something is made in America, it often isn't necessarily made by Americans. And immigrants are doing this stuff. They're making these things happen, and they are helping the economy, and at the same time, as we've discussed before, taking jobs that Americans could be doing, but that nobody wants to pay them for, which brings us to, it's not the immigrants who are coming over and taking the jobs, it is the employers who are giving the jobs to them. So the next time anybody tells you immigrants are taking our jobs, you have to remind them that no, employers are giving your job to immigrants. That is a completely different thing. And simply getting rid of the immigrants is not going to get you your job back. They're not wanting to pay you that kind of money. They're not wanting to pay you what you think you should be earning, and that's why those jobs are going to other people. So it's a much, much larger system at work here that is creating situations where it seems like immigrants are taking jobs. So you look at that and you go, oh, immigrants are taking jobs that Americans could be pouring that concrete or putting that steel or whatever that thing is. Those should be American jobs. Well, you need to talk to the people who are building these plants about that, not the people who are doing that work. People doing that work are just laborers like you or me or anyone else who has a job. And they are coming in and doing work and getting paid for it and presumably doing a good job as they do it. And that's how the system is currently set up. And if so, the effort to direct your anger at immigrants is very conscious misdirection. It is not, that is not who you should be angry at if you are angry about this situation. And that is a point I have made on the show so many times, and I bore myself with it, but it bears repeating. If you are angry about immigrants, quote unquote, taking jobs, you're not angry at them. You're angry at the people who are giving them, who are encouraging, who are creating a situation where they are only wanting to pay a small amount for a certain kind of work. As we become increasingly globalized, the world becomes increasingly globalized in the sense that goods and services are flowing back and forth across borders. There is a sort of evening out process of pay and profit and all those different kinds of things that is taking place. And so money is flowing overseas constantly and has been for a long time now. I remember years and years ago, and I think I talked about this on a previous episode, when a friend and I went around and we decided we were going to see if it was possible to only buy things made in the U.S. And we quickly found that it was almost impossible to do that unless you shopped exclusively in vintage shops. If you just went around and bought things, you know, the kinds of things that people generally buy, electronics, household goods, commodities, even food, to find things exclusively that came from the U.S., were manufactured here or whatever, was just next to impossible. You could go to some stores and not find any product at all made in the U.S. And this was years ago. This was like, 15, 20 years ago, maybe, something like that. And that's the first step. This auto plant construction, you're bringing Europeans over to do that. That is another step where you bring people in to do jobs and then send them away again. It is the flip side of buying goods overseas and then bringing them here to sell. It's the same process at work. It's people trying to maximize their return, maximize their money, their profit, and minimize their expenditures. And so when you can buy an item from China for less than you can buy that same or a comparable item made here in the U.S., they do that. And then that's why when you go to the stores, you can say, oh, look at how cheap this stuff is. This is great. I can afford a new TV or a new car or a new this or that. The reason you can afford those things is because people are making those kinds of decisions somewhere in the chain. They are buying things, products overseas and bringing them here, and are able to sell them more cheaply than if they were buying a similar product that was produced here, and or the service, the labor to put these things together. If you can bring in immigrants to do that work and then send them away, you are saving money in that process as well. And this is part of just competing on a global stage. It's part of that. It's also part of the idea of owners of business that their only reason to be involved in it is to make money. They don't care how it's made. They just care that they make it. And so a system based around people trying to just make the most money they can, they're going to make those kinds of decisions. And if you're here saying, well, I deserve $40 or $50 an hour, and you should be hiring me because you're an American corporation, well, that doesn't mean anything to them. And if you don't like that, that's what you should be angry about, is that the owners of these businesses don't care about where they make their money or where they spend it. They just care how much of it they make and how much of it they spend. And so it's something to be conscious of when you're thinking about who to be angry at. I'm not saying that it's a great situation. I'm not saying that it is not very hard for you, the American laborer. I'm an American laborer. I get that that's a difficult place to be in the world, but it is something to be aware of how how all of that is working and what it all means. And we need to be really careful how we apply the pressure that we as citizens are able to apply by voting, by raising our voices and making our thoughts heard. We have to be careful what we're saying and what we're advocating for, because if you let them frame the conversation, they will do exactly what they've been doing, which is framing it as immigrants are taking your jobs and you should be angry at them about that. And that is very, very, very wrong. Just like it would be wrong for someone to be angry at you coming in and taking their job because the owner of a business likes your skill set and your attitude more than it likes he or she likes someone else. They shouldn't be mad at you. If anything, they should be mad at their employer and say, hey, I've worked here for 20 years. You should be loyal to me just like I was loyal to you. Not mad at you because you have a greater skill set or a better attitude or whatever. Anyway, I'm just going on and on here. My time is up. I've got to go. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Hopefully we'll have a guest one of these days. Until then, you've been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. We'll see you later. Have a great week.